Welcome back, everybody, to another deep dive. And today we're going to be looking at something really interesting. And I'm really excited about this one.
Oh, yeah, this is going to be good.
Yeah, it's all about linguistic forensics.
Ooh.
And basically what we're going to be talking about today is how language can be used to deceive.
Right.
And we're going to be focusing specifically on romantic scams.
Interesting.
But also just in general, like everyday situations where the things that people say can kind of reveal more than maybe we realize on the surface.
Yeah.
So our source material for today's deep dive is really fascinating. It's this YouTube interview with Dr. Seila Geralt, who is like a leading expert in this whole field of linguistic forensics.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I've heard of her.
Yeah, so let's just jump right into it. So what is linguistic forensics? Like, how would you explain that to somebody who has never heard of it?
Well, when you think about it, language can be like a fingerprint, It reveals all these little details about a person, their background, their education, even their age. Like, you can tell a lot about a person just from the way they use language.
That's so cool.
Yeah, and linguistic forensics, it examines like all those subtle cues in our word choices, the grammar we use, even like typos to, get all this hidden information.
Oh, that's so interesting. I never really thought about it that way. But it makes sense. Like, you can kind of tell when somebody is like, from a certain part of the country, or like if they're really educated or not, just based on like the way they talk and write.
Exactly. It's like our words are leaving a trail, and anyone with the right skills can follow them.
Yeah, it's kind of creepy when you think about it.
It is a little bit, but it's also fascinating,
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So Dr. Gerald, in this interview, she mentioned how even journalists who are like trained to write objectively, they still struggle to hide their true linguistic identity.
Right.
It's like no matter how hard you try, your words are always going to betray you in some way.
It's true. We all have these unconscious patterns in our language.
Right. It makes you think like, what does my own writing style unintentionally reveal about me?
Exactly. Like think about the way you phrase things, the vocabulary you use, even the emojis you favor. All those tiny little choices can actually reveal a surprising amount about who we are.
Wow. Okay, so how does all of this apply to something like a romance scam?
Well, romance scams are a lot more common than people think.
Really?
Yeah. And Spain, actually, with its thriving online dating scene, it's kind of a hotspot for these Casanovas of crime, as Dr. Geralt calls them.
Like Casanovas of crime. I love that.
Right.
But how do these scams actually work? Like, how do they unfold?
Well, there are different phases to a typical romance scam.
Right.
First is like the seduction phase, where scammers will use information they've gleaned from like social media.
Oh, sneaky.
Yeah, to create this like perfect partner persona. And they'll mirror your interests, your values, even your language style to try to build that sense of connection really quickly.
Wow. So it's not just about what they say, but how they say it.
Exactly.
They're like tailoring their language to match their victims' expectations.
Yeah, like a chameleon.
But wouldn't keeping all those fabricated stories straight eventually lead to like inconsistencies or contradictions?
You'd think so, right?
Yeah.
But that's where their skills as linguistic manipulators really come in.
Okay.
They might avoid outright lies and instead use like vague language or half-truths.
Oh, so they're not technically lying.
Right. They're being deceptive, but not outright dishonest.
Sneaky.
And they'll often repeat certain phrases or ideas, hoping to like plant seeds of doubt or reinforce a particular narrative. And if you start asking too many questions, well, they're masters of deflection.
I'll bet.
Quickly changing the subject or turning the blame back on you.
So manipulative. It's really chilling to think how carefully they craft their language to like manipulate their victims.
Yeah, it is.
Are there any specific examples of language they might use during that like seduction phase?
Oh, yeah, for sure. One common tactic is to emphasize words like trust and sincerity.
Oh, to like build that false sense of security.
Exactly. And they might shower you with excessive flattery and affection. What's known as love bombing.
Love bombing. I've heard of that.
Yeah, just to make you feel really special and sweep you off your feet.
So if somebody is like constantly telling you how amazing you are or like declaring their undying love super early on, that could be a red flag.
It could be, yeah. It's like if it seems too good to be true, it probably is.
Right. But wouldn't those over-the-top declarations eventually start to sound insincere?
You'd think so, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
But these scammers are often really good at mimicking genuine emotion.
Wow.
They'll use romantic language, poetic metaphors, and even personalize their messages with details they've gathered about you
Oh, wow.
to make their words seem more authentic.
So they're like creating this linguistic illusion,
Yeah.
like a carefully constructed fantasy world, just to lure in their victims.
Exactly. And once they've gained your trust, the scam moves into the next phase, the sting.
Oh, no. So this is where the requests for money start.
Precisely. The requests usually start small, preying on your empathy or guilt.
Oh, man.
They might claim to have a sick family member who needs urgent medical care.
Oh, no.
Or they might say they need help with travel expenses to finally meet you in person.
And by this point, the victim is so emotionally invested, it's hard to see the manipulation.
Yeah, they're blinded by the fantasy.
So are there any red flags to watch out for in this phase? Like, how can we protect ourselves?
Always be wary of inconsistencies in their stories. Do the details add up? Do they have a history of needing financial assistance? Another red flag is a reluctance to meet friends and family, or even video chat.
Ah, because they want to keep that relationship in that fantasy bubble.
Exactly, where they have total control.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
So how do these scams usually end? Does the scammer eventually just disappear?
Yeah, pretty much. The final phase is the unmasking. Once the scammer feels they've extracted as much as they can from the victim, or if the victim starts to question their motives, they simply vanish, leaving behind a trail of broken hearts and empty bank accounts.
It's just heartbreaking.
Okay.
Not only have these victims lost money, but their trust and faith in human connection has been shattered.
It's true. It's a devastating crime that leaves lasting emotional scars. But here's the chilling thing.
What's that?
Linguistic deception isn't limited to romance scams. It's all around us.
Oh, no. So how else is linguistic forensics being used to uncover deception in everyday life?
Well, think about it. It can be used in so many different situations, like Dr. Geralt briefly mentioned infidelity.
Right.
How can linguistic analysis be used to detect that?
Yeah, I'm curious.
Well, think about how your partner communicates with you.
Okay.
Have there been any significant changes in their language patterns?
Like, what do you mean?
Maybe they've become more evasive or secretive, or perhaps they've started using certain phrases or nicknames that just raise red flags.
So even something as simple as like a new nickname could be a clue.
Absolutely. It could be a sign that they're trying to compartmentalize their life or create distance in the relationship.
That's so interesting.
Linguistic forensics can also be used to analyze text messages, emails, even social media posts.
Oh, wow.
To look for inconsistencies, hidden meanings, and those subtle cues that reveal a person's true feelings and intentions.
It's like digital detective work, using language as the evidence.
Exactly. And it's not just infidelity. Linguistic analysis can be used in cases of cyberbullying.
Oh, right.
To unmask those anonymous online harassers.
That's so important.
It is. We can also use it in child custody disputes.
Wow.
To analyze a child's language for signs of parental coaching.
So even in those really sensitive situations, linguistic forensics can help uncover the truth.
Yes, and even in cases of suspected suicide,
Really?
we can authenticate suicide notes by examining the language
Wow.
to rule out foul play or coercion.
That's incredible. So linguistic forensics is like this super versatile tool with a wide range of applications.
It is.
Now, Dr. Gerald also talked about the importance of silence.
Ah, yes. The power of silence. What isn't said can be just as revealing as what is said.
It's true. Sometimes a well-placed silence can speak volumes.
Exactly. Silence can be a weapon, a form of manipulation, or even a way to confirm suspicions.
But with all this technology, things are getting even trickier, right?
You're talking about AI.
Yeah.
The AI challenge is very real. Artificial intelligence is blurring the lines between human and machine communication,
Right.
making linguistic deception even more complex. It makes you wonder, is the person you're interacting with even human?
Yeah, that is a scary thought.
It's a question we increasingly need to ask ourselves.
So before we delve into that whole world of AI and linguistic deception, let's take a moment to reflect on what we've learned so far. It's been quite a journey, hasn't it?
It has. We've seen how language can be used to deceive, especially in the context of romance scams. We've also seen how linguistic forensics is being applied in a variety of fields to uncover the truth and protect the innocent.
Yeah, and we've started to explore those profound implications of silence and the rise of AI in shaping our understanding of language and communication.
And we've only just scratched the surface, really. There's so much more to discover.
Exactly. And in our next segment, we'll delve deeper into the world of AI and linguistic deception. We'll examine how AI is changing the landscape of communication and explore the challenges of distinguishing between human and machine-generated language. Stay tuned.
It's going to be good.
Yeah.
Welcome back to our deep dive into linguistic forensics.
Picking up where we left off, we were talking about how technology and especially AI is adding all these crazy new layers of complexity to linguistic deception.
Yeah, it really is fascinating.
It is.
And kind of unnerving, too, when you think about it, how AI is blurring the lines between human and machine communication.
Mm-hmm.
It makes you wonder if the person you're interacting with online is even real.
Totally. And it's getting more sophisticated all the time.
Right.
So how can we even begin to detect these new forms of deception?
Well, it's important to remember that even the most advanced AI can't perfectly replicate the nuances of human language. At least not yet.
So there's still hope for us humans.
There is.
But what are some strategies we can use to stay ahead of the game?
Okay. Well, one strategy is to be aware of AI's limitations.
Yeah.
AI can generate text that seems human, but it often lacks the depth of understanding and that ability to engage in really meaningful conversations. It's like they can mimic the surface of language, but they don't really grasp the underlying emotions, intentions, and those complexities that drive human communication.
So they might be able to fool us with a quick chat or a social media post, but they'll trip up when it comes to those deeper, more complex interactions.
Right, exactly. They might struggle to maintain consistency in their stories or adapt to unexpected turns in the conversation.
Yeah.
And that's where those inconsistencies and red flags we talked about earlier become even more important.
So even in the age of AI, those classic signs of deception still hold true. We still need to be on the lookout for contradictions, evasive language, and anything that just feels a little bit off.
Exactly.
Trust your gut. Yeah. Don't underestimate the power of intuition.
Exactly. If your gut is telling you something isn't right, it's worth paying attention to.
Okay.
You're not just dealing with words on a screen. You're interacting with another mind, whether it's human or artificial.
Right. It's easy to forget that sometimes with all the technology.
Right.
But I have to admit, it's all a bit overwhelming. How can we possibly keep up with all these ever-evolving forms of deception?
It's a challenge for sure. But any skill, recognizing linguistic deception takes practice and awareness.
Okay.
The more we expose ourselves to different forms of communication, both human and AI generated, the better we'll become at spotting those subtle cues that reveal the truth.
So it's all about honing our linguistic detective skills.
Exactly.
Constantly observing, analyzing, and questioning the language we encounter. Dr. Geralt, in a YouTube interview, she mentioned this really fascinating case involving a notorious scammer named Rodrigo Noguera.
Oh, yeah, I remember that one.
He was like a real-life con artist.
He was.
Charming his way into the lives of over 100 women over a span of 20 years.
It's incredible.
It is. What were some of his linguistic tactics? Did he have any signature phrases or patterns that gave him away?
Well, one of his most effective tactics was his ability to adapt his language to match the expectations and desires of his victims. He was a chameleon, changing his colors to blend in with his surroundings.
Wow.
He would research his victims so thoroughly, using information from social media and other online sources to create this persona perfectly tailored to their interests.
So he was crafting custom-made linguistic traps for each of his victims.
Yeah, basically.
That's crazy.
It is pretty devious.
It is. So he'd emphasize words and phrases that he knew would resonate with them.
Exactly, creating this instant sense of rapport and connection.
What kind of stuff?
Well, he often used romantic language, referring to his victims as princesses or speaking in terms of fairy tales and destiny.
Oh, yeah, playing on those fantasies.
Yeah, and he'd also play on their empathy, sharing stories about his own supposed hardships and vulnerabilities.
Oh, to make himself seem more relatable.
Exactly. It was all part of the act.
It sounds like he was playing a very carefully crafted role.
He was.
Using language to, manipulate emotions and build trust.
That's exactly what he was doing.
But surely there must have been some inconsistencies in his stories. Some linguistic slip-ups that, revealed his true nature.
Well, you'd think so, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
But he was incredibly careful.
Wow.
He avoided making outright lies whenever possible, opting instead for vague language and half-truths. And when his victims started asking too many questions, he was a master of deflection.
Oh, I bet.
Redirecting the conversation or shifting the blame.
So he was like a linguistic Houdini.
Yeah.
Slipping out of tight spots with his clever wordplay. But how did they finally catch him? What was the linguistic smoking gun?
Well, it was a combination of factors. You see, while he was skilled at adapting his language, he had certain unconscious habits that gave him away.
Oh, like what?
Like he tended to use certain abbreviations, emoticons, and vocabulary, even when he was trying to vary his style.
Interesting. So even the most skilled linguistic deceiver can't completely erase their linguistic fingerprint.
Exactly. There's always some trace left behind. And in his case, those traces were enough to link him to multiple online accounts and ultimately prove his guilt.
It's amazing how linguistic forensics can be used to uncover deception and bring these criminals to justice.
It is.
But it's not just about catching the bad guys, is it?
No, it's not.
Like, linguistic forensics can also be used to protect the innocent.
Absolutely. For example, in cases of suspected suicide,
Right.
linguistic analysis can help determine whether a note is genuine or a forgery. You know, we look for patterns of language that are consistent with the individual's known writing style, as well as any signs of coercion or manipulation.
So it's like linguistic forensics can be a matter of life and death.
It really can. The insights we gain from language can have profound consequences, both positive and negative.
Yeah.
And as we move further into the digital age, these insights will become even more crucial.
Especially with the rise of AI. It seems like we're entering a whole new era of communication where the line between human and machine is becoming increasingly blurred.
Yeah, you're right. And as we navigate this new landscape, we need to be more mindful than ever of the language we use and the messages we send, both online and offline.
It's true. Words have consequences.
They do.
And in our next segment, we'll explore those consequences in more depth.
Okay.
Looking at the ethical implications of linguistic forensics and the challenges of balancing privacy and security in the digital age.
It's a really fascinating topic.
It is.
We'll delve into how linguistic analysis can be used for both good and bad, and how we can all become more responsible and ethical communicators in this ever-evolving world of language.
And we are back for the third and final part of our deep dive, all about linguistic forensics.
It's been quite a journey exploring the deceptive side of language, hasn't it?
It really has. But now I'm kind of curious about the ethical side of all this. Like when we're talking about analyzing people's language, we're essentially getting a glimpse into their inner world, right?
You're absolutely right. Their private thoughts, feelings, even their intentions. It's powerful stuff.
Yeah, and it makes me wonder, where do we draw the line between legitimate investigation and straight up invading someone's privacy?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? There are no easy answers. But one thing is for sure, transparency and consent are absolutely crucial. People need to know how their language is being used and have the right to control their own data.
So informed consent is key. You can't just go around analyzing people's language without their permission. It'd be like eavesdropping on a private conversation, even if it's a digital one.
Exactly. And just like any other scientific field, linguistic forensics needs to operate on solid ethical principles and rigorous methodology. You know, we need to be absolutely sure that the techniques we use are reliable and valid, and most importantly, unbiased.
So it's not just about the technology itself. It's about how we wield it. We need to use this linguistic power responsibly and ethically. But even with the best intentions, there's always a chance for misinterpretation, right? I mean, language can be so ambiguous, and context is everything.
You've hit the nail on the head. That's why linguistic forensic experts need to be so highly trained and skilled in interpretation, you know? They need to be able to factor in all the things that could influence a person's language, like their cultural background, their emotional state, and even the specific situation they're in.
So it's not just about analyzing words in a vacuum. It's about understanding the big picture, the whole communicative landscape. It's almost like being a linguistic detective, piecing together clues from the language to figure out what really happened and uncover the truth.
Exactly. And as we become even more globally interconnected, understanding these cultural nuances and how they impact communication becomes even more critical. A phrase that might be totally innocent in one culture could be super offensive in another.
It's like we need to become linguistic diplomats.
Yeah.
Bridging the gaps between different languages and cultures.
I love that analogy. Linguistic forensics can definitely be a powerful tool for promoting understanding and empathy across cultures.
Yeah.
But let's not forget, it can also be used to exploit those cultural differences.
Right? Like we've seen with the rise of online scams and all those misinformation campaigns spreading like wildfire.
It's a powerful reminder that even the best tools can be used for good or for evil.
Yeah. But at the end of the day, I truly believe that knowledge is power. The more we learn about how language can be used to mislead us, the better equipped we'll be to protect ourselves.
Absolutely. Linguistic forensics isn't just about catching the bad guys or solving those thrilling mysteries. It's about giving everyone the tools to be more savvy with information, more critical in their thinking, and ultimately more effective communicators.
It's about taking control of our own linguistic destinies. So as we wrap up this deep dive, What are some key takeaways that we can all apply to our everyday lives?
Well, first off, be aware of your own personal linguistic fingerprint. Pay attention to your word choices, your grammar, and your overall communication style. What messages are you sending without even realizing it? And how might other people interpret your language?
So self-awareness is a big one. We need to pay attention to our own linguistic habits and how they come across to other people.
Exactly. The second thing is be skeptical. Don't believe everything you see and hear, especially in the online world. Question assumptions, double-check information, and always keep an eye out for those red flags we talked about earlier.
Like, channel our inner Sherlock Holmes. Be on the lookout for clues and inconsistencies.
Precisely. And lastly, and I think this is the most important one, be authentic. Cultivate genuine connections with people you can trust. Communicate openly and honestly. In a world filled with linguistic smoke and mirrors, authenticity is a powerful thing.
Be real. Be true.
Yeah.
Be you. In a world where language can be so easily twisted, those simple words have never been more powerful.
Beautifully said. And remember, language is a living, breathing thing. It's always evolving, adapting, and shaping the world we live in. So stay curious, stay mindful, and keep exploring the power of words.
And on that note, we've reached the end of our deep dive into the world of linguistic forensics. It's been an incredible journey, and I hope you've walked away feeling empowered, informed, and maybe even a bit more linguistically savvy.
I've loved sharing these insights with you. And remember, language is a powerful tool. It's up to us to use it wisely.
Until next time, stay curious, stay skeptical, and above all, stay authentic.